The crystal formations on Zelthara Prime glowed with an eerie blue light as Ambassador Kithari pressed her scaled palm against the communication console. Her 3 hearts beat in different rhythms, each one reflecting the growing panic that spread through her elongated frame. The massive viewing screen before her displayed the horrifying sight that had haunted her dreams for the past 7 rotations. The Vorthak swarm moved like a living shadow across the star field, their bioships pulsing with organic menace. Millions of them, maybe billions, all heading directly toward the peaceful Zeltharan colonies. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, covered in chitinous armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Tentacles as thick as city blocks writhed from their hulls, while weapon ports glowed with the sickly green of dissolved worlds. "Status report," Kithari commanded, her voice betraying none of the terror that clawed at her insides. Fleet Commander Nextal stepped forward, his 4 arms moving in the traditional gesture of dire news. His usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, evidence of the sleepless cycles he had endured. "Ambassador, our scouts confirm the worst. The swarm has consumed the entire Helix Nebula region. 17 civilizations, gone without a trace. They're not just destroying worlds anymore, they're harvesting them completely." Kithari closed her large, compound eyes. The Helix Nebula had been home to over 40 billion sentient beings just 1 standard month ago. The gentle traders of Remix 7th, known throughout the galaxy for their beautiful crystal sculptures. The aquatic mines of Flux Station, whose underwater cities had been marvels of engineering. The silicon-based collective of the Burning Worlds, who had taught the galaxy how to harness solar energy efficiently. All gone, consumed by the endless hunger of the Vorthak. "How long do we have?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "At their current speed, they'll reach the outer colonies in 23 standard days. The core worlds, including Zelthara Prime, have perhaps 45 days before—" Nextal's voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The war room fell silent, except for the soft humming of the climate systems and the distant vibration of the planet's core. Around the massive oval table sat representatives from 12 different species, each one representing worlds that stood in the swarm's path. The ethereal singers from the cloud cities looked like living mist contained in elegant robes. The rock speakers from the Mining Confederation resembled walking mountains with gentle, wise expressions. The plasma dancers flickered between states of matter, their forms constantly shifting between solid and energy. None of them had weapons. None of them had armies. The Galaxy Council had outlawed war 3,000 years ago, after the Great Purge had nearly ended all intelligent life. Since then, conflicts were resolved through negotiation, economic pressure, or, in extreme cases, isolation protocols. The concept of organized violence had become as foreign to most species as breathing underwater. But the Vorthak didn't negotiate. They didn't trade. They didn't communicate beyond the screams of their victims, which they broadcast on all frequencies as they consumed world after world. "We need to contact the Outer Rim," Kithari said finally. "There are species out there who still remember the old ways. Warriors who chose exile rather than peace." The Cloud Singer representative, whose name translated roughly to Whisper of Dawn Wind, spoke in harmonics that resonated through the chamber. "The Catharian battle priests were banished beyond the void boundary. Even if we could contact them, they swore never to return to civilized space." "What about the Zephyrian war clans?" suggested one of the rock speakers, his gravelly voice making the floor vibrate slightly. Nextal shook his head with all 4 arms. "Extinct. The Crimson Plague took their last stronghold 500 years ago. For hours, they went through every possibility. Ancient warrior races that had either died out, evolved beyond physical conflict, or sworn binding oaths never to take up arms again. The galaxy had been so successful in eliminating violence that they had also eliminated their ability to defend themselves. As the debate continued, a young communications officer burst into the chamber. She was a quicksilver sprite, barely larger than Cathari's hand, but her silver form glowed with excitement and terror. "Ambassador, we've detected new signals from the unknown sector. Grid reference Omega 779. Every being in the room froze. The unknown sector was the great mystery of their galaxy, a region of space that had been marked as uninhabitable for as long as galactic records existed. Ships that ventured there either returned immediately, with tales of impossible gravitational anomalies and radiation storms, or they never returned at all. "What kind of signals?" Cathari asked, her scales changing color with anticipation. They're responding to our general distress broadcast, the one we've been sending to every corner of the galaxy." The sprite's voice wavered with uncertainty. "But, Ambassador, the translation matrix is having trouble with their language. It's so aggressive. Even their basic communication protocols contain references to combat, victory, and something they call acceptable losses." A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. What kind of species structured their very language around concepts of war? Cathari straightened her posture. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and filled with static. Then, slowly, an image resolved. The being on the screen was unlike anything in the galactic database. It stood upright on two legs with two arms and a single head. Its skin was a pale pinkish color, and its eyes were small and forward-facing, like a predator. Most disturbing of all, it showed its teeth when it spoke, white fangs gleaming in what their species might consider a friendly expression. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the creature said, its voice carrying an odd mixture of authority and warmth. "We received your distress signal about the Vorthak swarm. We're familiar with their tactics." The translation matrix struggled with several concepts in that simple sentence. United implied cooperation in warfare. Defense Force suggested organized military capability. Familiar with their tactics indicated prior combat experience. Cathari found her voice after several long seconds. "I am Ambassador Cathari of the Zeltharan Commonwealth. We were not aware that your sector was inhabited." The human's lips curved upward more, exposing even more teeth. "Oh, we've been here for a while. Earth sits right at the edge of what you call the unknown sector. We've been watching your galaxy with interest for about 200 years now." Watching? The word carried ominous implications. Learning, studying, preparing. Admiral Chen's expression shifted to something that the translation matrix identified as concern. "We've encountered the Vorthak before, 3 times actually. Each time they tried to establish a foothold in our region of space." Nextal leaned forward, his 4 arms trembling slightly. "What happened to them?" The human's response was simple, delivered with matter-of-fact calmness that somehow made it more terrifying. "We exterminated them." The silence in the war room was absolute. Exterminated. Not defeated, not repelled, not negotiated with. Exterminated. Cathari struggled to process this information. You killed them all?" "Every last one in our territory," Chen confirmed. "The Vorthak don't understand mercy or surrender. They're a hive mind dedicated to consumption. You can't reason with cancer, Ambassador. You can only cut it out." The medical metaphor sent chills through every representative present. This species thought of warfare in terms of surgery, of healing through destruction. "We're prepared to assist you," Chen continued. "But I need to be clear about what that means. Humans don't do half measures when it comes to extinction-level threats. If we commit to this fight, we commit completely." Cathari's training in diplomacy kicked in. "What would you require? Resources? Technology? We can offer—" "Nothing," Chen interrupted. "We have everything we need. The only question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." The Cloud Singer representative flowed forward, its misty form agitated. "What do you mean?" Admiral Chen's expression grew serious, and for the first time, the assembled aliens caught a glimpse of something predatory in those small, forward-facing eyes. "You called for help against the Vorthak swarm. You're going to get it. But what's coming isn't a rescue mission or a humanitarian aid package. What's coming is the full military might of a species that evolved on a Class III death world, where everything that wasn't trying to kill us was teaching us how to kill better." The translation matrix sparked and overloaded, trying to process Class III death world. The concept didn't exist in galactic terminology. "How many ships can you spare?" Nextal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Chen's teeth showed again in that disturbing expression. "Ships? Ambassador, you misunderstand the situation. We're not sending ships to help you. We're sending the Fifth Fleet." "How many vessels is that?" Cathari asked. 12,847 combat-ready ships, ranging from destroyers to dreadnoughts, plus support craft, medical ships, supply vessels, and mobile shipyards. Call it 15,000 ships total." The numbers didn't make sense. No species in the galaxy maintained more than a few hundred vessels for exploration and trade. The concept of 15,000 ships designed specifically for combat was incomprehensible. That's impossible," stammered one of the rock speakers. "No single world could support such a fleet." Chen's expression grew puzzled. "Single world? Ambassador, Earth is just our home world. The Fifth Fleet represents about 3% of our total military capacity. We have colonies, mining operations, and shipyards across 237 star systems." The silence stretched on for what felt like eons. Finally, Cathari found her voice. "Admiral Chen, what exactly is humanity?" The human leaned back in her chair, and for a moment, her expression softened with something that might have been pity. "We're the species that looked at a galaxy full of wonders and asked, what if something tries to take this away from us? Then we spent 10,000 years making sure we'd have an answer." She paused, as if considering how to explain something fundamental to children. "You see, Ambassador, your species achieved peace by forgetting how to fight. Humanity achieved peace by becoming so good at fighting that no one dares to challenge us. The Vorthak are about to learn the difference between those two approaches." The communication ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Outside the crystal windows, Zelthera Prime's twin moons rose over the peaceful cities below, where billions of beings lived their lives without ever imagining the kind of force that was now racing toward them through the void. Cathari stared at the blank screen and realized, with growing horror, that they might have just invited something far more dangerous than the Vorthak into their galaxy. But as she watched the readings showing the swarm's inexorable approach, she knew they had no choice. The Galaxy Council had called for help. Now they would discover what help looked like when it came from a species that had never stopped preparing for war. The sensors aboard Zelthera Prime's orbital stations began registering impossible readings 18 days after Admiral Chen's transmission. What appeared first as gravitational anomalies quickly resolved into something that made every scientist on the monitoring stations question their equipment. Ambassador Cathari stood in the primary observation deck, her scaled hands pressed against the reinforced crystal viewing window. Below, her homeworld sparkled with the soft bioluminescence of its evening cycle. Above, space itself seemed to be tearing apart. "Ambassador," called Senior Sensor Operator Vexani, her voice pitched high with disbelief. "You need to see this. The readings they're not possible." Cathari moved to the central display where a three-dimensional hologram showed the outer system. Red indicators marked the positions of hundreds, then thousands of objects emerging from what humans called hyperspace jumps. But these weren't the gentle transitions that galactic species used, where ships slipped quietly between dimensions like dolphins diving beneath waves. These were violent tears in reality itself. Space buckled and twisted as massive vessels forced their way into normal space with complete disregard for the delicate fabric of space-time. Each arrival sent gravitational shock waves rippling outward, interfering with the planet's tidal systems and causing aurora displays visible even in daylight. "How many?" Kethari whispered. "Current count is at 14,712 vessels," Vexani reported, her 4 eyes each focused on different readouts. "And they're still coming." The main display zoomed in on the nearest cluster of ships, and Kethari felt her 3 hearts skip in unison. The human vessels bore no resemblance to anything in the galactic database. Where civilized ships were flowing, organic curves designed for beauty and efficiency, these were angular blocks of metal and armor. They looked like weapons that happened to have engines attached. The smallest ships were the size of Zeltharan city blocks, bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. The largest defied comprehension. One dreadnought, designated UES Indomitable according to their identification broadcasts, was longer than Kethari's entire city. Its hull was scarred with what looked like battle damage, but their sensors indicated the marks were decorative, intentionally preserved as a reminder of past victories. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," announced Communications Officer Delthari. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Chen again. But this time, she was clearly aboard a starship. Behind her, Kethari could see other humans moving with purposeful efficiency. They wore matching uniforms of dark blue and gray, with metal insignia that spoke of rank and specialization. Most disturbing of all, every human she could see carried weapons. Not ceremonial pieces or tools that could be adapted for defense, but obvious, purposeful instruments of violence. "Ambassador Kethari," Chen greeted, her tone professional but carrying undertones of barely contained energy. "The Fifth Fleet has arrived at the coordinates you provided. We're establishing a perimeter around your core systems and beginning tactical assessment of the Vorthak approach. Admiral, your fleet is larger than we anticipated," Kethari managed. Chen's mouth curved in that predatory display again. "Actually, this is a relatively small deployment. We considered sending the Second Fleet instead, but they're currently engaged in pacification operations in the Magellanic Clouds." Pacification operations. The translation matrix registered the phrase but couldn't assign proper context. What could humans possibly be pacifying in the empty space between galaxies? "We've brought medical ships as well," Chen continued. "Our field hospitals can treat most known biochemistries, and we have refugee transport standing by in case evacuation becomes necessary." Fleet Commander Nextall stepped forward. "Thank you, Admiral. Our own evacuation plans can accommodate roughly 12% of the population of threatened worlds." 12%? Chen's expression shifted to something the translation matrix identified as incredulous. "Ambassador, exactly how many beings are we protecting here?" Kethari checked her datapad. "The immediate threat zone contains 47 inhabited worlds with a total population of approximately 230 billion souls." Chen was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice carried a hard edge that made the air in the room seem colder. "I see. Relay to your evacuation coordinators that human refugee ships can carry the entire population if necessary. We don't leave anyone behind." The idea was absurd. Even if such ships existed, the logistics alone would be impossible. But before Kethari could voice her doubts, new alarms began sounding throughout the station. "Ambassador!" Vexani's voice cracked with panic. "The Vorthak! They've accelerated their approach. They'll reach the outer colonies in 6 days, not 23. The tactical display updated to show the swarm's new trajectory. Instead of the steady, methodical advance they had maintained for months, The bioships were now moving at maximum speed, consuming smaller asteroids and debris to fuel their acceleration. They had detected the human fleet's arrival and were racing to engage before the aliens could organize their defenses. Admiral Chen's image leaned forward, and for the first time, Cathari saw something that made her blood run cold. The human was smiling, but it wasn't the friendly expression from before. This smile belonged on the face of a creature that had just spotted prey. "Excellent," Chen said, her voice dropping to what could only be described as eager anticipation. "They want to fight immediately. That saves us time." "Saves time?" Cathari couldn't keep the shock from her voice. "Admiral, they're a day ahead of schedule. Our defensive preparations aren't complete." "Ambassador, with respect, your defensive preparations were never going to stop the Vorthak anyway." Chen's tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind, but absolutely certain. "The swarm operates on the assumption that their enemies are like you, peaceful, unprepared, committed to defensive thinking. They're about to encounter an enemy that has spent centuries perfecting the art of aggressive warfare." The display behind Chen showed the bridge of her flagship, and Cathari got her first clear look at human military operations. Officers moved with mechanical precision, calling out reports and confirmations in clipped, efficient phrases. Weapon systems that had names like plasma lance arrays and quantum torpedo bays were being brought online. Most shocking of all, the humans were calm. There was no panic, no desperate preparation. They looked like they did this every day. "Fleet Admiral Chen to all ships," came a broadcast that Zeltharan sensors picked up across the entire system. "Vorthak contact in 6 days. Battle stations. Combat protocols are now active. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Total warfare authorization. I repeat, total warfare authorization is granted. Total warfare authorization." The translation matrix crashed, trying to process the concept. "Admiral," Cathari called out, "what does that mean?" Chen turned back to the camera, and her expression carried a gravity that made the air seem heavy. "It means we're no longer bound by the conventions of civilized warfare, Ambassador. The Vorthak don't take prisoners, don't recognize surrender, and don't leave survivors. So neither do we." New readings appeared on Zeltharan sensors as the human fleet began moving into position. What they revealed defied every assumption about space combat. The ships didn't form defensive lines around the inhabited worlds. Instead, they spread out in an aggressive formation that pointed directly at the approaching swarm. "Admiral, are you advancing toward the enemy?" Nextal asked, his 4 arms gesturing in patterns that indicated deep confusion. "Of course," Chen replied. "Ambassador, in human military doctrine, the best defense is often a good offense. We're going to meet the Vorthak at the edge of your system and destroy them before they can threaten a single civilian." "But there are millions of them, possibly billions." Chen's predatory smile returned. "Yes, it should be a good fight." The transmission ended, leaving the Zeltharan command staff staring at each other in stunned silence. Outside, the human fleet continued its impossible maneuvers, ships larger than cities moving with the precision of dance partners. Weapons that could crack planets, charged with energies that made the system's star look dim by comparison. Over the next 4 days, the Zeltharans watched with growing awe and horror as humanity revealed the true extent of their capabilities. Supply ships the size of moons deployed automated factories that began producing ammunition at rates that consumed entire asteroid belts. Hospital ships extended medical bays that could treat millions of casualties simultaneously. Repair vessels worked around the clock to upgrade human weapons with new technology reverse-engineered from Vorthak biosamples. But most terrifying of all were the humans themselves. They never seemed to rest. They worked in shifts that allowed their fleet to maintain peak efficiency at all times. They spoke casually about battle tactics that involved acceptable casualty rates and strategic sacrifices. They discussed the complete extermination of the Vorthak swarm, not as a desperate goal, but as a routine military objective. On the fifth day, Admiral Chen broadcast to all inhabited worlds in the system. Citizens of the galactic community, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. In approximately 18 hours, our fleet will engage the Vorthak swarm at the edge of your system. I want you to understand what you're about to witness. Her image was being broadcast to every screen on 47 worlds, reaching an audience of hundreds of billions. She looked directly into the camera with those small predator's eyes and spoke with absolute confidence. Humanity has been preparing for this kind of threat for our entire existence. We are the descendants of creatures who survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and our own worst impulses. We are the species that looked at a universe full of dangers and decided to become the most dangerous thing in it. She paused, letting that statement sink in. The Vorthak swarm represents everything we have trained to destroy. They are extinction made manifest, death without purpose or mercy. For 10,000 years, human civilization has asked itself one question. What if something comes for our families, our homes, our future? Today, you will see our answer. The broadcast switched to tactical displays showing the human fleet's formation. 15,000 ships arranged not in defensive clusters, but in attack waves designed for maximum offensive power. We are not here to drive the Vorthak away, Admiral Chen continued. We are not here to negotiate or find a peaceful solution. We are here to demonstrate why humanity has never lost a war of extinction. When this battle is over, the Vorthak threat to your galaxy will be ended permanently. The transmission concluded, and across 47 worlds, billions of beings stared at their screens in silence. Many had never seen weapons of war. None had ever encountered a species that spoke of extermination with the casual confidence of artisans discussing their craft. In the depths of space, the Vorthak swarm approached with hungry inevitability, their bioships pulsing with the eagerness of predators who had never encountered prey that fought back. Neither force knew that they were about to collide in a battle that would redefine what the galaxy understood about the nature of war, peace, and the terrible price of survival in an indifferent universe. The humans were ready. They had been ready for 10,000 years. The battle began at 347 hours, Galactic Standard Time, with a light show that could be seen from the inner planets with the naked eye. Ambassador Cathari watched from the primary observation deck as space itself became a canvas painted in violence. The first contact occurred at the very edge of the system, where the human vanguard met the leading tendrils of the Vorthak swarm in a collision that sent shockwaves through subspace itself. The Vorthak attacked with the same tactics that had served them across 17 conquered civilizations. Their bioships, each the size of a small moon, launched swarms of smaller organisms that moved like living torpedoes. Acid clouds spread between the ships, designed to eat through hulls and disable life support systems. Psychic screams broadcast on all frequencies, intended to drive enemy crews insane with terror. It should have worked. It had always worked before. Instead, the humans met them with something the galaxy had never seen: coordinated, disciplined, overwhelming firepower. The UES Indomitable fired first. Its main gun, a weapon the humans called a stellar lance, fired a concentrated beam of pure energy that stretched across 3 million kilometers of space in less than 2 seconds. The beam struck the lead Vorthak bioship and simply erased it from existence. Where there had been a living vessel the size of a city, there was now only dispersing atoms and empty space. Impossible, whispered Senior Sensor Operator Vexani. Nothing can generate that much power. The tactical display updated as more readings came in. The humans weren't just firing single weapons. Every ship in their fleet was synchronized in patterns that created overlapping fields of destruction. plasma lances, quantum torpedoes, gravitational pulse weapons, and technologies that the Zeltheran computers couldn't even identify filled the space between the fleets with deadly precision. But the Vorthak had numbers. For every bioship the humans destroyed, 2 more took its place. The swarm pressed forward through the wall of fire, accepting casualties that would have broken any rational military force. Their smaller organisms began to reach the human ships, covering hulls with corrosive acids and attempting to bore through armor with diamond-hard teeth. This was when Cathari got her first glimpse of what Admiral Chen had meant by total warfare authorization. The human ships began to glow. Not the gentle luminescence of normal energy fields, but the harsh brilliance of matter being converted directly to energy. They were using their own hulls as weapons, superheating their armor until any organism that touched them was instantly vaporized. Ships that were damaged beyond repair didn't retreat for repairs. They accelerated directly into Vorthak formations and detonated their reactors in nuclear fireballs that consumed everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. "They're destroying their own ships," Fleet Commander Nextal observed, his 4 arms trembling with shock. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communications channel, calm and professional despite the apocalyptic battle raging around her flagship. "Acceptable losses, Commander. We have more ships. They don't have more bioships." The mathematics of the battle were becoming clear, and they defied everything the galactic species understood about warfare. The Vorthak had arrived with approximately 40 million bioships of various sizes. The humans had brought 15,000. By any rational calculation, humanity should have been overwhelmed in the first hour. Instead, the human weapons were so advanced, their tactics so refined, and their willingness to accept casualties so complete that they were destroying Vorthak ships at a rate of nearly 3,000 to 1. But the true horror began when the humans deployed something they called cleanser protocols. New ships emerged from the human fleet, vessels that looked different from their warships. These were sleek, silvery craft that moved with purpose through the debris field. As they passed over the remains of destroyed Vorthak bioships, they released clouds of what looked like metallic dust. "What are those ships doing?" Cathari asked. Chen's response was matter-of-fact. "Ensuring complete eradication. The Vorthak are a hive mind, Ambassador. Even scattered cells can regenerate into new threats if given time. Our cleanser ships deploy molecular disassemblers that break down all Vorthak organic matter at the atomic level. We call them nanophages, machines designed to consume specific biological patterns and nothing else." The scale of what she was describing slowly sank in. The humans weren't just winning a battle. They were systematically erasing their enemy from existence with weapons that could distinguish between different types of life and eliminate only their targets. As the hours passed, the battle shifted from a desperate fight to what could only be described as an extermination. The Vorthak, for all their numbers and viciousness, had never encountered an enemy that fought with such calculated brutality. They were predators used to terrorizing prey, not warriors prepared to match their savagery and exceed it. Human ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting even after suffering catastrophic damage. Crews worked in sections exposed to vacuum, wearing mechanical suits that turned them into living weapons. When ships lost life support, the humans didn't evacuate. They sealed themselves into armored compartments and kept firing until their ammunition was exhausted, then rammed their vessels into enemy formations. "Admiral," Cathari called over the communications channel, "your casualties must be enormous." Chen's image flickered on the main screen. Behind her, the bridge of her flagship showed signs of battle damage, but her crew continued their work with mechanical efficiency. "Currently at 7% losses, which is within acceptable parameters for an extermination action." 7%. The humans had lost over 1,000 ships and were treating it as a minor inconvenience. The tide of battle turned decisively when the human reserve fleet arrived. Without warning, Space tore open again as thousands more ships translated from hyperspace directly behind the Vorthak formation. These weren't reinforcements. They were a completely separate fleet that had been traveling through dimensions to position themselves for a trap that must have been planned before the battle even began. "This is Admiral Rodriguez of the 7th Fleet," came a new transmission. "Initiating hammer and anvil formation. All Vorthak forces are now contained." The trap was perfect. The Vorthak swarm found itself caught between two human fleets, each one equipped with weapons that could crack planets. What followed wasn't a battle. It was systematic annihilation. The final phase lasted 6 hours. During that time, 40 million bioships were reduced to atomic particles by weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The humans deployed gravitational mines that created artificial black holes, consuming entire Vorthak formations. They used quantum resonance weapons that caused enemy ships to vibrate apart at the molecular level. They fired rounds of exotic matter that simply deleted sections of space-time, taking whatever occupied those coordinates out of existence entirely. When the last Vorthak bioship was destroyed, the silence was absolute. Admiral Chen's voice broke the stillness. "All ships, report status. Begin recovery operations for damaged vessels and casualty evacuation. Deploy deep space scanners to confirm total elimination of hostile biomatter." The aftermath was almost as shocking as the battle itself. Human recovery ships moved through the debris field with precision that suggested they had practiced this exact scenario countless times. Medical vessels began treating wounded from both fleets, human survivors and, incredibly, any other species' ships that had been caught in the crossfire and damaged. But most disturbing of all were the human soldiers themselves. As rescue operations continued, the galactic observers got their first close look at individual humans outside of their ships. They were smaller than most galactic species, built along simple, efficient lines. But they moved with predatory grace and carried weapons as naturally as breathing. Even their medical personnel were armed. "Ambassador." Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of formality that hadn't been there during the battle. "The Vorthak threat to your galaxy has been permanently eliminated. Our deep space scanners confirm complete eradication of all hostile biomatter within a radius of 50,000 light-years. 50,000 light-years. They had destroyed not just the swarm that threatened the core worlds, but every trace of Vorthak presence in the entire galactic region. "Admiral, this goes beyond what we requested," Cathari managed. Chen's expression was patient, almost gentle. "Ambassador, humanity learned long ago that threats like the Vorthak don't respond to partial measures. If we eliminate 99% of them, the remaining 1% will eventually regenerate and return stronger. Complete extinction is the only effective solution." Over the following days, as the human fleets began their departure preparations, the true scope of their capabilities became clear. They had lost just over 1,000 ships in the battle, but their mobile shipyards were already producing replacements at a rate that suggested they could rebuild their entire fleet in a matter of months. Their casualty numbers, while classified, appeared to be less than what most galactic species would lose in a minor shipping accident. The humans had fought and won a battle against an extinction-level threat, suffered minimal losses, and were treating the entire affair as a routine military exercise. "Ambassador," Admiral Chen said during their final communication, "there's something your people need to understand about what just happened here." Cathari had been dreading this conversation. "What do you mean?" "Humanity doesn't fight wars to win territory or resources or political advantage. When we go to war, it's because someone has threatened our survival or the survival of our allies. And when we decide that something represents an existential threat, we don't stop until that threat is completely eliminated." She paused, and her expression carried a weight that seemed to press down on the entire star system. Your galaxy has been peaceful for 3,000 years because you outlawed war and chose diplomacy over violence. That's admirable. But it also left you defenseless against something like the Vorthak. Humanity achieved peace through a different method. We became so effective at warfare that nothing in the universe dares to threaten us. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just saved the galaxy from the Vorthak swarm. They had revealed themselves as the apex predators of known space, a species so militaristically advanced that they could casually exterminate threats that would have ended galactic civilization. "What happens now?" Cathari asked. Chen's predatory smile returned, but this time it seemed almost reassuring. "Now you go back to your peaceful lives, Ambassador. Build your crystal cities, compose your harmonic symphonies, and explore the wonders of the universe. But you can do so knowing that humanity is out here, watching the darkness between stars, ready to respond if something like this happens again." The human fleets departed as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving behind only empty space where the greatest battle in galactic history had taken place. Within weeks, the only evidence of the Vorthak swarm's existence were the historical records and the traumatic memories of those who had witnessed their destruction. But the galaxy had been changed forever. Every species now knew that somewhere beyond the boundaries of civilized space, humanity waited with weapons that could reshape reality itself, and the absolute conviction that some threats could only be answered with total annihilation. The peaceful species of the galaxy had called for help against an extinction-level threat. They had expected aid, assistance, perhaps some military advisors or advanced weapons. Instead, they had received something far more terrifying and infinitely more effective. They had been adopted by the most dangerous species in the universe, one that had spent 10 millennia perfecting the art of war and was prepared to use every lesson they had learned to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The age of galactic peace continued, but now it was guaranteed not by the absence of violence, but by the presence of those who had mastered it completely. And in the deepest reaches of space, beyond the edge of known galaxies, human deep space monitoring stations continued their eternal watch, sensors sweeping the cosmic dark for any sign of threats that might emerge from the spaces between stars. They found things out there sometimes, ancient evils, hungry machines, cosmic parasites that fed on the light of dying civilizations. None of them ever reached the peaceful galaxy humanity had claimed as their own. The galaxy had asked for help, and they had received guardians who would ensure that they would never need to ask again.